Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Nest Town Group, as Mark already mentioned. Our primary purpose is to develop and to implement a model town for the AMHARA region in Ethiopia. The model town is for the rural environment and local farmers. The model town is for self-building, self-management, self-governance. All three in the way of cooperative social structures. The aim of the town is food security, health security, education security, and communication and transportation security. Earlier today, Dieter Lepple reminded us to reflect on the possibility of bringing back production to the city or to the town. In the case of AMHARA model town, production means agriculture, horticulture, forestation, fishery, and related ways of manufacturing. We call this town agriculture. Town agriculture means higher density of people, continuous water provision for all-year farming, differentiation of and diversity of agriculture production, respectively products, various modes of transportation, added value chains, and market access. This is the Nile fall of the Blue Nile, and people looking at Lake Tana, the catchment basin of the Blue Nile, which feeds Sudan and Egypt. I'm sorry for this. Okay, this was the illustration of town agriculture as it is done at the moment in Bardar, the capital city of AMHARA region. And here already the mentioned exhibition space in which, for the first time, our model of the AMHARA town was exhibited at the inauguration day of Dirk Hebel's presidency of the school. And the other thing was a milestone for AMHARA model town because the plans for this were given over to Ato Halawi Joseph, who is a prominent politician, on October of 2009, with the explanations of all the principles and elements and components and rules on this poster exhibited in this marvelous pavilion of Marx in Addis Ababa. The land of AMHARA region is primarily around Lake Tana, as mentioned before, on the highlands, approximately 1,500 meters above sea level of the Ethiopian mountains. It's an old caldera, and beautiful, with very fertile if it's wet. And you do not know anything about this land because there are no data available about the volcanic situations. You only know that Ifak, who was at the left, was an earlier slave market, and the town which we planned is situated 500 meters to the east of the road from Gondar to Bardar. Here you see a first walk in November 2009, very hard-working people, plows which were established about 500 to 600 years ago, drawn by oxen. The growth of the population is approximately 3%, and more than 50% of the people are below 20. 50% of the days in the year are holidays dictated by the church. The Kebele is the lowest political entity, administrative entity, and it has approximately between 2,000 and 12,000 people per Kebele before it goes into the next level. The model town is organized around a center, grows into 4 directions, and has around neighborhood units, which we call close, 180 to 200 households per unit, which means 900 to 1,200 people. And here you see the particular relationship and change of the town and between the usual settlement. The commons as already mentioned, is given to the town by the majority vote of the Woreda Assembly. And I would like only to refer that this is the base for what later on Elinor Ostrom called the tragedy of the commons. The hidden agenda is basically always coming from the soil. And this kind in particular, this is black cotton soil, which has the nature of swelling up when it's wet, 60% of the volume, and drying again back. It's not capable of, unfortunately, of making pressed bricks, and nor is it good for foundation. So all this kind of construction, which we transferred from Philip Bloch, is not possible to do. Water is twice a year, a dry season and a rainy season, and also when it's raining, flooding. Nobody told you this, although it's part of the town. Groundwater, no data exist. You don't know about the quality, you don't know about the quantity. You only know that this is the women's way of transporting water from the source to the home. Land rights, already mentioned. This is the monument, the president giving a speech at the foundation ceremony, and the founding memorial was destroyed by upset farmers who could not claim the promised compensation. Law and governments, this at the beginning, the dignitaries by the Town Foundation Act, in June 27, 2010, and now already the mentioned laboratory in Singapore, where after all these appointments and learnings with the soil and the land, the model was adapted in that team we formed in Singapore, on new premises, new construction material, namely eucalyptus tree, because it is available, and also handling the soil problem with other foundation, and also allowing 3 types of agriculture for the town agriculture in the gardens, between the house rows, then the court and around the close, the areas which is also good enough for livestock agriculture, and then outside of the close you would have the conventional agriculture on long fields, which can change and be transformed if appropriately irrigated. This was presented to the partners and discussed, and finally one decided to have this vote. You hear the voice of what I call the angel of the project. It's a lady. She is the General Director of the Regional and Urban Planning Institute and has been committed and loyal to the whole project since the very beginning. And here again, Benjamin Stähli, who is introducing the project and explaining it.
Into your hands. Today, you will decide the project.
Now they go inside and have a view on the plans, which, as Mark already mentioned, are shown via the VW 1965 battery. And now
this is the new road.
After this information, one made a decision, and as hoped, maybe from people expected, the vote was unanimous for master plan and for the action plan of the road, so that one had a legal base, almost like in Switzerland, from a top-down presentation of the plan and a bottom-up vote in a federalistic way of doing things. The interesting thing, though, was for me that each time after the vote you come, this was informed by the Ethiopian press, in order to, we wanted to do that in order to make it transparent. It's our first time event in federal Ethiopian governance. But I come back to a story. Each time you come back now, that 10%, you have seen more, 10% more houses on common land. Question: how does the land authority enforce law, particularly after a democratically legitimized plan in the assembly? This will be an agenda point in the coming November, to find out how can you resolve this conflict. What I would like to show here in the second story out of the four is a comparison between conventional way of living and innovative way of living, in order to find out the jump which should be accomplished in the transformation while town building. This is a typical Kebele center now on the top of a hill. People come from 20 to 30 kilometers from all sides every 2 weeks and congregate there to 4,000 to 8,000 people. Below you have a typical tukul. In the inside of this tukul, a typical toilet about 20 to 30 meters away from the tukul. On the right, a fire, which is also during the night, of course, giving the light. How come? No electricity, of course, how come? And the animals live together with the men. These are all things which are issues when you build AMHARA model town. Now the innovations. First, the site. The site and the density, another organization, because the infrastructure of water irrigation, as shown here or remind here, it makes it necessary to make short distances, to make compact ways of doing things. And the water is coming from the roofs of these houses, and is for town agriculture, and one of the parts of the areas around are also for livestock, hopefully without grazing, but this is probably going to be the most difficult issue ever in producing town agriculture, to separate the livestock from people. Then, in order to do this, we had to invent another type of structure, and together with the irrigation system, called a system of soil and water management. The blue lines represent the irrigation system coming from the roofs, which collect water via cisterns, and the overflow, you irrigate the rest of it. And the roof had to be as large as possible because of the collection of the water, and also because of protecting the ground from the becoming rainy. We found out that the proposed systems were too expensive, so we had to go back to conventional systems. This is the drawing of a typical rainwater unit. You produce 8 houses, 35 meters of length, and particularly one of the big changes, a 2-story high house with an arcade on one side and a garden side on the other one, and with a toilet and cistern, half cistern in the garden, including on top of the cistern, a fireplace for the kitchen. The structure was another issue of necessity for inventing. As I said before, eucalyptus trees. These are round tree bumpers, about a diameter of maximum 8 centimeters. And we had to invent a new way of bringing things together, of making connections. Here you see the eucalyptus trees, and here you see a school exercise, so to speak, of the connections, how to bring these eucalyptus trees together. On the base of this, we established first the construction of a prototype 1, which is this one, from November to March of this year, from November last year, and particularly with this particular problem of the foundations also. And we found out after it was finished, it's too complicated, too many connections, too expensive, the house is too large. We have to reduce construction costs by minimum 50%. So what do? you construct a new prototype too, which is this one. Of course, much more elegant, we had learned. Other connections, stable connections, less wood for the same volume, and also a working roof construction. And finally, we decided that it had to be tested by the best possible engineers of the country, which we fortunately got through our partner, Fasil Georgis. And we addressed this issue with 3 questions. Does the structure fulfill the legal requirements with regard to load support and wind resistance? We wanted to perfectly have an answer to this question because this structure has to be sufficient for public buildings, 2-story buildings, for instance, for schools, even parts of health centers. The second question was, does the structure transmit forces efficiently, respectively optimally? The answer was, ideas of connection details are excellent. Quality of execution is exceptional in Ethiopian context. And the last question was, can the structure and the amount of materials be further optimized with regards to building maintenance and repair costs without violating the above-mentioned legal requirements? There, one got the hint that the foundation could be improved and become more economical with applying certain techniques. While this was happening, the 6 carpenters, which were imported, so to speak, from Bura to learn this, to get these skills, were hiding behind the experiment and were praying that nothing would happen. Fortunately, nothing happened. We got an excellent report and signature. This was very important, of course, for the local officials. And these typical notes of construction for scaffoldings, which are usually done, could be for a moment forgotten. And the 6 carpenters were released and happy and went back to Bura, because the place where this happened was in Bahir Dar, as heroes of the day. We do neither act in Bahir Dar or as investors nor as NGOs. We are rather practitioners, teachers, and researchers. The actor's diagram is easy. It's us, it's the government, and the people. So the question for the real-life experiment you saw a moment ago, the hypothesis, you build a new town, you build a model town. The model is the conditions which are very important for this experiment. No gifts without cost sharing, because otherwise it's a gift if you do something. No missionary zeal or colonialist ambition, because then you are top and they are low. No, you are in a learning situation as well. And capacity building and empowerment of people in the center. The model town is a device to produce guidelines and illustrative handbooks for all levels of government. One day we got a phone call from the vice president, who was responsible for the project from the government side, and asked, when do we get results from AMHARA model town? So the idea was to make a workshop which took place in last July, because assessing is an ongoing, continuous process in experimenting. It was necessary to invent a robust methodological approach, which was in 4 points. 1, the conceptual premises, which I only discuss in a very few instances, like 4E is a code for the forces shaping the development and urbanization of a town towards the wanted beneficial and equitable direction. It stands for education, ecology, energy, and exchange, and must be seen as a parallelogram of interacting forces. The 4Es, in the meantime, are adopted as a government policies for all new towns in Ethiopia. Food security. Second point, and value-adding activities. They can sell products and know-how at improved quality, is the idea, coming from water and waste management, building material fabrication and testing, building components manufacturing, like for instance toilets, better, more efficient ovens, doors, windows, based on the concept of modular construction, which can be disseminated all over the place and have local manufacturing. The third point is land evaluation. There, I must admit, I had in that workshop an incredible surprise. Because I was expecting that people would start to talk about criteria of selecting sites for new towns. No. It's almost like in Switzerland. Because it's given where the new town can happen. It's called the commons. So what you do when you map the commons, where are the commons, and then you start to put the town. And this, of course, is an extremely difficult, complex process of transforming rights. Then the last point is governance. There, let me point out 3 points. Budgeting, from bottom up to parliament and to regional authorities, and particularly the coordination, we discovered is a problem in terms of time and in terms of issues, in terms of competencies. When you want to do something on a local thing, how is the process and what kind of process is it going until the government can make a final decision? Cost sharing was an extremely successful approach, which we did from the very first moment. And another not so successful situation yet is the communication between the different actors. Maybe this is in Switzerland sometimes a bit better, you don't know, but what is particularly interesting is that the communications between lower level of governments and upper level of governments is problematic. So what were the results? I would like to highlight 3. Namely, town building was discovered and acknowledged as an integrative construction process. Components are more software than that what we usually think hardware. It's an integration and coordination of different sectors, also of government and of people at once. And this coordination you could call ein Gesamtkunstwerk. Sometimes I really feel myself there as a little conductor of a symphony of 90 people, you know. Then what also was acknowledged is the steering committee on a regional level and the implementation committee on a local level, things which did not exist before. And something which was very, very fascinating to observe and also acknowledged is that the town implementation is used as a vehicle to fill or to find gaps between different levels of government. And then you find out you have a lack of staff, you have a lack of know-how, you have a lack of coordination and financial resources and so on. The participants at the workshop are in the center, the Vice President of AMHARA region, our partner Fazil Georgis, then the lady, the Director General of Regional Urban Planning Authority, the angel, and then the 4 Nest Town members, group members, which are mentioned here. The image of the town comes, 4th story and last story, from the architecture of its institutions, infrastructures, and fabric of housing. This is a marvelous informal piece of architecture which as a reference. for compounds, for walls. A 200-meter long wall of corrugated steel. I would like to do that in Switzerland. Here, the plans of the town core, town tree, and the central square with the 4 nuclei. The town is a radial town. The growth pattern, as you saw, is spiraling around the core, producing rings of activity and residence like a tree. Then you go in the detail of that square, around which the 4 nuclei are, representing the 4 E's. The center of this square or accent is this wonderful tree, which is the Parliament building, because it's a place where conflicts are resolved, conflicts, decisions, rituals. So this will be the tree which we will plant in a few weeks from now, there. And it will grow and grow and grow like the town. I would like to show now the 4 nuclei, what we thought about. The nucleus 2 is the most strategically important one at the moment. It's, so to speak, a Bauhaus market. It's where you find model houses, fabricated material. We build a model rainwater unit, which is 34 meters long. 2 houses are models, and the other 6 are used for workshops and stores for materials, including systems and water. And 2 types of model houses are going to be constructed soon. One is the so-called budget type, with side walls, roof, 1/3 of a floor only, instead of a whole floor, and the second, a ladder, a half of a cistern, and eventually a toilet and electrical power. The second house, what we call standard, is a full built-out house with all walls, all floors, all ceiling, half a cistern, a fireplace covered above the cistern, and a toilet and an electrical power line. So you can see what you get at the beginning with this and this money, and then what you can construct later on, and what you have to pay then and then and then. So you get that moment of differences. The next nucleus is the nucleus 3, the market. It's the void behind that tree, which you saw, behind that line, which represents the relief channel, which is under construction. It's here on that side. And it's a void for the moment, because we are very confident that as soon as people are there living, you will have a market, will you not? You will have a bus station, will you not? So, let's leave that for the moment to itself. And then nucleus 1 is maybe the most important, besides the nucleus 2, namely it's a place for the education, for a technical training center which has been decided upon. And the first thing we want to build is the garden and irrigation, plus the compound boundaries. Because this is where you produce livelihood for the students. So this is the first thing you have to do. Then come the living quarters, and then the offices for the arcade so that teachers and so on have a contact. And then at the end, the classrooms, which are on the upper part of this plan, because you can use the workshops under the roof of nucleus 2 as a classroom. So this is nucleus 1. And now the sections for the housing to the left, the classrooms to the right, and the cross sections with the water, of course, in the middle. The story of nucleus 4 of the community center is a story in statu nascendi. The actors of this story, you will see them in a moment here, is the chief priest in the middle, to his right the head of the youth education, and to his left the warder. Here you see the priest and the monks in front of the existing church, which is 2 or 3 kilometers further south, but they want to have a town church in the middle of town. So we discussed with them the need This is a monk in front of his cell. And they leave now after that discussion, where we also discuss not only the need, but also how do you do the plan, how is the size of this church. It's 20 meters in diameter, and it's going to be round, for sure. And now the question raised, how do you combine the dark church with the idea of a rainwater unit? And that was the plan which we drew on sand. And these are the two priests. Typical, one to the left is the progressive one with one kind of cross, and the other one to the left is the more conservative one with another type of the cross. And now, after this discussion, we leave the grove and go towards the town center, towards the bridge, which is under construction, connecting the town center with the road. The unfinished bridge is perhaps a good symbol for the actual situation. It does not connect yet this side with the other. It does not present the link between the past with the future. It may even stay the way it is. The plan. You can never be sure of the things you do not control. We only control the things, as you saw in the plan, which were under the budget of Holcim, because we got from them in seeding capital. But you don't know whether the government money will ever come, or whether the authorities will do what they are ordered to do. But what we would like to achieve is that what was on the plan by the end of this year, so that the nucleus 2 plus the whole basic infrastructure is ready for the building of the close one, as Mark showed it, hopefully supported by Allgemeine Baugenossenschaft Zürich, and ready for being built, the technical university. Now, this is the last image. Look, there are two generations of men. The men to the right, some of them are the fathers of the kids to the left. When the fathers were at the age of the kids, they had to hide from the henchmen of Stalinistic dictatorship, had no chance of watching or learning by watching. That's the difference. Thank you. Now, thank you. Let me make a few comments to this. These are the founding members of Nestown Group. Half of Nestown Group is here. It's Mark, it's Dieter Lepple, it's Peter Schenker, it's Philipp Block, and myself. The other half is not here. And I would like to thank them and to acknowledge their trust, their commitment, their loyalty, and work and friendship. Particularly to Peter Schenker, who since 2007 has been given out his passion and his free time to do all the plans. The supporters, which you see here, without the generous and trustful and also non-bureaucratic support of Holcim Foundation, this would not have been possible, because it gave us the seed money and some stick pressure in order to do things and to have the means in your hand to sharing. If you have only words or plans to share, nobody does anything. So I'm very happy and very grateful for the Holcim Foundation. And last but not least, I would like also to thank you, Gerhard, for your support you always gave as a SEC director to whatever we tried to do in Singapore. Thank you.
Any questions for the two gentlemen? There's some questions from the back. Yes, please. You take the center stage.
Hey, thank you. My name is Nicholas. I study at the ETH, Agricultural Sciences. First of all, thanks for the wonderful presentation. So I would like to pose maybe 2 questions. The first is, were the locals eager to collaborate with you? And the second is, what would you do, what would you change if you did the same project on another part of the world maybe? So what are the learnings? Yeah, thank you.
Well, we are working on several projects at the same time. So we have a similar project going on in Brazil at the time, and the conditions are extremely different. And we had selected Addis Ababa originally because we found a peaceful form of poverty, and we thought we would have an easier access to the stakeholders, which was ultimately not the case. It got extremely complicated. And we went to Brazil because we wanted to encounter a more aggressive form of poverty, and what we're experiencing there is an easier way to communicate with people. So whatever assumptions you have at the beginning will never happen. I think Ethiopia was more difficult than we thought. Okay? Our entry into it was coincidental. And we have a lot of discussions also together with Gerhard, when is the right, and with Dirk obviously, when is the right moment to exit? Because we are there to do research, and ultimately the locals need to take the lead. Okay, this is our objective. They need to build their own town, and so. The critical issue would be when can we remove ourselves from the equation? Okay? And with the school, I think we're on a good direction. Dirk was the director. We are nurturing now a young Ethiopian who is doing his PhD in Hamburg under the leadership of Dieter Lepple, and within 1 or 2 years he will become the director of the school. So I think with the school we are fine. With the town it's much more complicated. Painfully complicated.
I would like to thank you for the 2 questions. I find them very, very crucial. And let me just give a few reactions to the first. Namely, were the citizens or the local people eager? This question was debated among us with Ethiopians and Europeans and so on very heavily. And usually we find the answer that yes, because the farmers would like to have their children a better livelihood than they themselves have. If you hear this, then you start to believe. Second aspect is that you then also can observe a concrete indicator. Namely, our boys, 50% of the population, as was mentioned, are below 20. So, you can go over this empty country and it's never empty. You have always kids around yourself. It's fantastic. So, then you ask yourself, go these kids to school? And they go. Which means they are confronted with a situation in which where they learn things, and they are already 10, 8-year-old kids can talk English with you, and he understands. And they learn to write and everything and so on. And in rural areas, depending on where you are, there is a problem, particularly with the gender situation, because after the first or 2 years, the girls may have to stay at home because they are needed to do their housework. See? So there are still things which have certainly to be improved, but I use this example in order to give not only subjective impressions, but to give a hint on how you can observe whether people want that what you are here for and what you also looked for. This is, by the way, a very, very, very difficult question. I give you another aspect. As a European, you always are confronted in Africa or in Latin America and also in Asia, for that matter, that Europe has not a very beautiful history in the past. You're always confronted with your colonialistic shadows. This is for the Swiss sometimes comfortable, because we're coming from a small country. Not presently now, because everybody knows about the banks. But anyway, you are confronted with these shadows of your own culture and history. And the other thing is that you also are confronted constantly with the traumatic memories of people. I'll give you another example. I hinted at it with the last image, talking about the fathers being chased by henchmen of the so-called Derg regime. What does it mean? That the Derg regime wanted to make a forceful urbanization, which was called villagization. So you collect people, you bring them from one place to another, and you allocate them land, and you give them barracks and stuff, and there you are. And if you want to do that, what do? You chase the boys, right? Because the boys, they are helpless, and the parents follow sometimes the boys in order to protect them also. You know, these are traumatic experiences of only 25 years ago. So people who are now in their 45-year-old have this in their bloods and brains. And coming back, and then I want to conclude with that, that also makes them silent. Huh? You know, you Ethiopians are sometimes very silent, right? No more? Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Okay, well.
Thank you. Well, this is a way of showing you that we are not silent anymore. My name is Hirate Nagash. I'm from Ethiopia, actually EIBC, Institute of Architecture from Ethiopia, and I'm a fourth-year architecture studying. So I'm very privileged actually to be here, hearing about my country being called in an international conference, and I'm very happy to hear that. And also the new proposals that are being done in our country is a very wonderful ideas also. What I want to ask is, last week we were introduced to this idea of complementary currency. Actually, it's way different, whole different dimension of from architecture. And this professor who introduced this idea to us was named Bernard Litter. Bernard Litter. And he was telling us about this thing. He said that life has a software and a hardware. So people live and they have software and a hardware. The hardware is where they have buildings and all those things that are physical. But then there is the software, their social life, their economical life. And he was telling us about this economical ideas, and he was introducing complementary currencies which can go well to, like, next to the other money, and substitutes also, like, people exchanging their skills instead of money. And what I wanted to ask is, have you ever considered of introducing the software for the AMHARA model town? And have you also tried to consider or propose how they could live so that their change could be sustainable?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for this extremely important question. We need to address the soft factors, economic, social issues of governance, etc. And this is why we at one point decided to pursue the idea of cooperatives in collaboration with Swiss cooperatives, but we discovered that there is a tradition of cooperatives in Ethiopia introduced by the Derg regime. So suddenly you get into difficult waters, because we think that this would be a very interesting way to establish, to strengthen social bonds with an interesting economic system that is based on distribution, is based on putting the profits of the collective back into the system and not taking profit out, with water cooperatives, housing cooperatives, agricultural cooperatives, and water and banking cooperatives. And this is where we are exactly at this stage now. And this is extremely important, because what I showed at the very beginning, there are other players that are knocking at the door, operating within the neoliberal capitalist system, with China at the forefront of all the efforts that are done. It's extremely interesting to see the presence of China in Africa in general, but also of companies from the Netherlands that are producing flowers on common grounds that they lease for 60 or 90 years, for the roses that we can buy here in Switzerland. So it is a contested territory, and the issue is, what are the economic structures that we can build up bottom up that are sustainable?
Thank you. My name is Mikhail. I'm also from AIBC Ethiopia. I have a couple of questions from yesterday's workshop at ETH. I heard that urbanization patterns follow economic patterns. The economic growth patterns. So Ethiopia, of course, at this time has 85% of agricultural-based economy. So it's sound to base a new model town on agricultural land, but there's also a shift in from agricultural-led economy into an industrial-led economy.
Yes.
So how do you see that, since it's going to be a sustainable town, how do you appropriate the industrialization patterns that we need for the country to grow? And also I have another question regarding the settlement patterns. Also Franz, Oswald was commenting on the previous regime, how they used to take people from one place and then move them and then put them on another place. Even though if it's in a close proximity from where they live, but still it's a new town. So how do you plan to settle, to bring people from their original place and then move them, or distribute the land? Maybe, I don't know if you have any settlement strategies that you want to implement. Yeah, I think that's enough question.
I think the first question should be answered by Dieter Leple. I don't know if he's here.
He's here.
Yeah. Dieter, you touched upon this issue in your lecture. And the second part, I think, is for you.
I didn't get it quite. Could you please repeat it, the first part of the question?
Maybe Ethiopia is changing from an agricultural-led economy into an industrial-led economy. At this time, there is a need for the shift, so that in order to cope up with the world growth and such stuff. So, how do you see that basing the model town on agricultural-based society, and then there's at some point the need to change it into an industrial-based economy somehow? I don't know, but if it's clear what I'm asking, from agriculture into industrialization, the economy is changing. I think urbanization is also tend to shift that way. That's my comment.
Well, as I understood it, the big question we have, we now are confronted with the economic situation of a dominance of substantial agro-production, which is just sufficient to survive somehow. And with the demographic development, the resources are getting more scarce and smaller. So there has to be a solution. And normally the urbanization process was linked with economic dynamic in the cities, but there is no dynamic situation in the city. So what the philosophy of the project is to create a microeconomy by using the creativity of the people, by auto construction, to create their own shelter, to create their own food in the form of the urban agriculturing, and to get by this intensification, the innovations, as Franz Oswald has shown, the possibility to develop value-added strategy, beginning with food processing. And one of the big philosophy is, aside of this food security, to open up this production to the market, that the people will get integrated in this system of small cities, that an exchange will develop, and that the form of a microeconomy, urban economy will develop. So this will give the chance by empowerment, by community building, by opening up, networking, to overcome this trap in this substantial agriculturing, with the continuous danger of hunger, and that every change of the climate will be disastrous for the people. And actually, I think that's the only way you can go. For you cannot wait that the industry will going to locate there and create gainful employment for the people. So they have to create their own economy. And by this food security, this health security, and especially the center of this new town, the school, qualifying the people to find solutions for their daily life problems, and use it at the same time to create a profession out of it. So this is a basic philosophy, I think, which is the basis of the town project. But Franz have to correct me off it.
No, thank you, Dieter. Maybe I say a little few words, which you raise a very important question. And I'm an architect, an urbanist, that's all. I'm not an economist. And so please, whatever I say is certainly not correct. But because this, what you raised, was an important question in the workshop, which I tried to describe a little bit. And the first question which came to me, and also I formulated it, what do you mean with industrialization? How do you define industrialization in your country, Ethiopia? This is the first question and answer you have to try to give. And I did not get a sufficient answer, even of very important people. I did not want to give the answer. I have an idea of what it could be, but I want it from them. Because the danger is that you only make copies of what you think industrial production is. And it cannot be this. It cannot even be a Chinese type of industrial reproduction of the past 20 years, because your base is a different one. Ecologically, it's a different way. Educationally, it's a different, and the craft and the skills is a different one. And one of the things, in my view at least, is that if one talks about industrialization, my personal conviction is that you do not want to make people depending from machines, which they cannot handle and repair. I give you a beautiful example, which I think is a very interesting case study. I know from Syngenta that they introduced extremely successfully in Kenya and in Tanzania an incredible insurance, harvest insurance scheme on the base of mobile phones. It's a fantastic invention, and it's apparently extremely successful. That when you see thunderstorms are coming and so forth, you can, through mobile, insure your harvest, and also make money with that. It's an incredible successful thing. I also know from other cases in South Africa where the mobile phone is, so to speak, producing for me as a bicycle driving person the market, because I'm going to the market by phone and not the other way around. Huh? I'm going to find. So these are fantastic things. Now, if I, from the very first moment, somebody shows me that he can repair the mobile phone, then I would immediately accept that. But if I am depending from a saving income to get for whatever, $100 or whatever, a mobile phone, if I cannot repair it, then I'm in a difficult situation, particularly if you think that the daily income of one of these farmers we are talking about here is what? $1.20 daily income, which means they make 50 to 20 cents an hour, working 8 hours. So how can you save on that base of income money to pay for a $100 mobile phone? So these are the relationships I would like to discuss if you talk about industrialization. And then last, my idea, or the idea which we agreed in this group I'm talking about, Nestown Group, is that if you introduce very simple manufacturing on the basis of modular construction, that's already the start, in our view, of industrialization. Because then you have to reduce elements to reproducible pieces, and you have large series, which you can do with practically no machinery, but with good handcrafts. So this would be, for me, one of the starts. So, but basic, to conclude is, for me, very important is to try to define carefully what you think industrialization is in Ethiopia now. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from this side of the room? Anyone else? I think we'll just hold that for a little while. We'll take one question from the back there. And if it's a short question, we may take one more, but if not, we have to close the session. The gentleman behind it? Or was it a lady?
Lady.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm also from Ethiopia. My question is that history shows that most of the urban centers in Ethiopia, they grow and originate naturally. So the master planners or the designers are the society themselves. But in this case, the knowledge and the expertise comes from outside. So the people or the society, they will remotely relate to the project, and there will certainly be some cultural transformation in the society. So is there any transitory space or time that is considered in the project? Are there any predictions how this will impact the society and other societies which are nearby to this space? Thank you very much.
I'll ask you to give a short response to that. Franz? Yes.
We have to address the history of the towns in Ethiopia.
So why don't you do that?
We are negotiating the answers. So.
No, well, you should,
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm speaking too much. What was exactly, because I was not carefully listening, I'm sorry. What was exactly the question you answered?
When we look at different urban centers or cities in Ethiopia, they naturally grow. They originate and they grow by the society. So the master planners or the designers are the society themselves, and it takes decades for them to grow. But in this case, the whole design is from external expertise. There are new technological or technical approaches as well, which are remote to the society, or the society are not accustomed to these approaches, which are included in the project. So this will bring some cultural transformations, definitely, because of the services and the efficiency that's going to be provided. So is this investigation, is it included in the project? What the impact will be on the society and other societies which are nearby these societies?
You raise many methodological questions. Like, for instance, the last one. How can anybody predict the transformation. You have to find out. Huh? That's why you make this kind of experiment. You can only, guess. It's a guessing process. The other one is I would like also to make some modifications or modifying comments on your premises of your question. You say that society is in Ethiopia doing this and that and the other. Who is society? Who? Society is nobody. Society has actors, has decision makers, has policy makers, has thinkers, has doers. So who are they? And you had in Ethiopia a very long urban history up to the feudalistic area, which started at the latest in the Aksumite Empire, right? So you have a long tradition. Take Lalibela. Lalibela is a fantastic example of a town history. And also Addis Ababa, for that matter, a fantastic example of, Menelik II and his wife giving the name, and so one could go on and on and on. Now comes then something second. So one could go on in the history of Ethiopia a long time to explain that it's not the people, it is a group of people who have knowledge, who want to do things in that way and the other. Then comes something which I find a tragic moment in Ethiopian history. And one has to know, because not many people are aware of that. And I'm not the only one, of course not. And that is that in the past century, 20th century, the past 50 years, since about 1960, Ethiopia lost 3 times its elite. 3 times. You know what that means? That means an enormous amount. That takes generations to overcome that void, that loss of knowledge, that loss of know-how, and so forth. So, this is also part of the urban history. And then the other one, society, I would like just to propose another hypothesis. Urbanization does not just happen like that. I bet with you 2 things or 3 things. I build a road and people will start to build their houses on the road. That's clear. It's clear. Why? Because they have access, then the road, they have access to the road. So that's why you see all over the place in the world the so-called urbanization along roads. You build a pipeline with water, people are going to build their houses along the pipeline with the water. It's clear. Why? Because you have more or less fresh water. You tap the water. You build an electrical power line, it's clear. It's going to be along that power line because you tap the power lines. So you see, I can only, with infrastructure, I can generate, like with a stick, in a mountain of ants, I can generate the momentum of urban concentration. So so one knows certain explanations, and these are also known. That's why I'm not quite happy, and also I feel uncomfortable with the premises of this question. You see, if I...
Can I add maybe to this? Because I felt uncomfortable with your question. First of all, I distrust expert knowledge. Generally, throughout the history of ideas, you realize that expert knowledge often failed. So therefore, we need to be critical vis-à-vis it. And second, you implied that we were coming from outsider, suggesting a new form of colonization by imposing our expert knowledge on existing structure. And that is not the case. That is 100% not the case. We're interested in a collaboration. And so the question is, when is your partner answering, and when is he playing the game with you or not? And therefore, as the first thing we did is we built the school. Okay? The school was the most important thing we have done, starting with how many students, Dirk, you had at the beginning? 800. Now 800. So now we have 2,500. Okay, now 2,500 students. Okay, we started with 800. It's bigger than the Department of Architecture at ETH Zurich. So what we have created is a platform to allow Ethiopians to teach Ethiopians. Okay? And therefore we can step out of it. Okay? And then you do what you think is right. Okay? So we were not the conductors, with 90 people doing exactly what the conductor wanted to do. We were interested in, imagine a conductor that is trying trying with his orchestra to have a participatory game, okay, where everybody, the flute and the trumpet and the drums can participate in this game. This is urbanism.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that's, I have to close the session. I know it was going to be a very interesting discussion, but it's tea time. And I think before we close, I just want to say that let's just go back to the beginning when Mark speaks about this project as a collaborative project, as a process of learning, as a process of learning together, with the local people, as well as sharing the knowledge, part of the research and part of capacity building. So I think that's an important message to this. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll come back after this.